Hello there, my friend. Welcome to a new episode of Talk Music Talk with Boice. I am Boice, and this is my podcast that you are checking out. If this is your first time listening to it, let me tell you that Talk Music Talk is a weekly music interview podcast where I have long-form conversations with people connected to music from different genres and different backgrounds, both emerging and established musicians, music therapists, singers, singer-songwriters. And on this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking to Josh Madell, an interview that was 2 years in the making. Recorded this back in May, just coming out now. Josh Madell is the co-founder of the beloved Other Music Record Store here in New York on 4th and Broadway, closed 2 years ago, 2016. This is a career-spanning conversation. We talk about Josh growing up in the Bronx and his love of music. We talk about his pursuing a music career. He is a drummer. We also discuss how Other Music got started. We talk about his current new project in its second year, the Come Together Label Fair and Music Festival. Also, we talk about the forthcoming documentary on Other Music. Great conversation with Josh. It was a pleasure to talk to him. I am sure you will enjoy this. Here it is, without further ado, my conversation with Josh Madell. As we record this, we're coming up on almost 2 weeks, week and a half, 2-year anniversary of Other Music closing, right? Is it May 9th?
It was the end of June that we closed.
Oh, was it June? Okay.
Yeah, we closed. It was the beginning of the summer of 2016.
Okay.
I think it was like the 24th or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like at that time, okay, you have no idea what the next 2 years are going to be like. What did it feel like for you at that time? Like you have all this stuff that has happened since. What was your state of mind after doing something for 20 years?
Literally what happened when we finally finished everything, like closed the store, had a couple days of starting to pack everything up and try to get out of there. Had that big concert and parade and farewell thing that was like on a Tuesday. I think our last day was Saturday. Tuesday we had that show, and then a couple days later it was the end of the month, and we had to be completely cleared out. And it was a crazy high pressure couple months, and those last couple weeks were just not a lot of sleep, and just finish one thing, and just like, okay, tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. we're gonna start sell these racks, do this, whatever. So I literally what I did was I fell asleep. Like we drove up to a friend's place. A few friends were getting together that weekend at someone's house in the Catskills, and we just I literally like drove up and got out of the car and sat down on this hillside in the sun and fell asleep, and like woke up. They woke me up like as it was getting dark or something. Dinner was ready, and that went on for a while. But I didn't know what was next. I mean, it was just getting through that. It felt more like ending something than beginning something, for sure. Okay. So I really didn't have an idea what was coming next, other than just trying to, I don't know, keep moving forward.
Is it any kind of like sadness? Well, maybe sadness, but depression or anything like that when you end something that long?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I like how we're just jumping into it here. Right? You're bringing me back to another place in time, but it was I mean, I was ready to move on in a lot of ways. From it was. The store had been open for 20 years. I was 25 when we opened. It had been my life and had been a great life. I mean, but we'd been struggling for a while financially. It was just getting really hard to figure out what the path forward was to make it work. It was very hard emotionally and even just logistically, financially. Just closing was difficult. Just figuring out a way to close and walk away from it and make it make sense. So all that was difficult, but I also just really didn't know what was coming next in my life. And, I have a family. worried about money, as we all are, and all those things, and just trying to figure out what my life was going to be. I'm generally a pretty upbeat person. I kind of can live in the moment pretty well and just kind of keep moving forward. And I think sometimes I didn't realize how hard it was on me just trying to figure out what I was going to do with myself. But yeah, for sure. It was really hard.
Okay. So did you ever know, say as a kid, was it about music that you were going to go to, or that a business would be what you were going into?
No, I definitely came into, I was a musician from the time I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And when I was a teenager, I started playing in bands and was very involved in just like the kind of New York club scene from the time I was in high school, pretty young. And played in bands and went to college for a year. But then dropped out to play music. Yeah. And moved out to the West Coast, did that for a few years, and then moved back to New York to join the band that I still play in, Antietam. But it was just, I started working in record stores part-time to pay the bills when I wasn't touring or whatever. But just, I loved being around that music. The New York culture in a record store was really a fun, exciting place to be, and hanging around with musicians, listening to music. It was a fun job to pay the bills with when I needed to, and then to some degree, the opportunity of opening other music just kind of happened upon me because the two guys that I was working with at the time at Kim's, one of the guys who started other music with me, Jeff Gibson, sort of started the music department at Kim's Underground, the Kim's chain. That was a big thing in New York in the 90s. They had a number of stores. And that store started doing pretty well. But it was just it was a toxic situation working for this businessman. Are you familiar with Kim's? Did you ever shop there or whatever? Yeah. He's a crazy New York story, that place. But then Jeff Gibson and Chris Vanderloo, who were the two guys I worked with at Kim's, started talking about opening up their own place, and then started talking to me about it. And then at some point, the three of us just made it work and, made the move.
Okay. And you are, going back a little, you're from New York?
I grew up here.
Okay, what part?
I was born in the Bronx. I was actually, strangely enough, I grew up in the Bronx. I was born at NYU Hospital, where I just, for some reason, I went there yesterday with my parents because my mom was screening this documentary that she made, and it was funny to be back in there. I probably haven't been in there since I was born. Okay. But we lived in the Bronx then. I spent the first few years in the Bronx, and then my parents moved to Yonkers. We were both my parents were from New York City, and they were both working in Manhattan my whole life, but we lived just north of the Bronx, in the very first few blocks of Yonkers, kind of because sort of a slightly suburban take on New York. It was that area has lawns and freestanding houses, which my parents thought would be good for raising kids. They were still commuting into the city every day, and I went to school up there in the Bronx, and then when we were still in high school and old enough to express our opinions, we encouraged them to move back into the city. Okay. So then we lived in Chelsea for the rest of my high school years. I moved away for a couple years, but I've been in New York almost my whole life.
Was drums your first instrument?
Flute was my first instrument.
How old were you?
Well, actually, no, did I play trombone? No, I guess I did flute first, starting in third grade. Okay. And I worked pretty hard at it. Yeah. And then by the time in sixth grade, we had an orchestra in my school. And because I was so much more advanced than the other kids who were just learning instruments for the first time, I started playing trombone, and I did that for a couple years. And then when I was in the seventh or eighth grade, I started playing drums because my school actually had it was a little jazz department in the music department. They had two guys, one of them whom was a drummer. And so I started taking jazz drum lessons and just started playing drums then. And then pretty soon after started playing in bands. And
why drums?
Maybe because there was a drum teacher there. I mean, but I don't know. What's more fun than hitting the drums? Drummers are a certain sort. I don't know. There's just something about it. There's nothing more fun than just pounding on the drums. I wish I actually had, like my mom had made me take piano lessons. I play keyboard and guitar and write songs on keyboard and guitar some, but I'm not like very good at any instrument except the drums. And I do wish I was, had a little more depth. But drums are fun.
Yeah. It looks like it.
Yeah. Definitely.
What were you listening to? Because you're learning jazz drums, but what were you listening to on your own?
In high school, I mean, I listened to a lot of music. I first got into rock and roll, like on the radio, and like my parents had Beatles records and stuff. My mom listened to a lot of music. She loves music, but it's much more folk and classical, kind of like straight up like American. I mean, like she loves Dylan, but like also, I mean, like Dylan and Pete Seeger and stuff like that. That scene, she was like kind of a part of that scene in New York. Yeah. In the Village back in the day,
like going to the shows and stuff, and all that
and even like playing. Like when she was in high school, she like would play on the Hootenannies and hang out in Washington Square Park and stuff, and be kind of part of that scene. I mean, a peripheral way, but for sure, she's always played guitar and other instruments around the house and stuff, and classical she listens to, but I got into pretty early. I'm trying to think. I mean, like I always ask people, I think it's always a great question, is what the first show you went to on your own or something. Yeah. I mean, I remember going to see, I did see Simon and Garfunkel in the park with my parents, and I saw Pete Seeger and some stuff like that for sure. Arlo Guthrie. I'm not sure who else. A lot of stuff like that when I was a kid. And then I went to see the Kinks at Roseland Ballroom when I was probably 14 or something. That was the first show I went to by myself.
Now, you asked your parents to take you?
No, I mean, I went with my friends. I was old enough that they would let me, maybe going out at night like that wouldn't have been a totally normal thing, but it was, I went out on a Friday night with some friends. But I got into punk or whatever that was in the mid 80s pretty early, and was pretty into like Husker Du and the Minutemen. When I was in high school, I loved those bands. Bad Brains, a lot of just indie stuff. The alternative bands at the time or something. But the SST thing, I was really into. I was into a lot of Discord bands and just kind of early indie, American indie stuff. And then just have sort of, that's where for a long time I was just very into the indie scene, but I was also always listening to, I loved Funkadelic when I was a kid, and a lot of reggae, jazz too, ska was really into. In fact, in high school, I was really into first wave ska, but also into a lot of the British ska bands when I was a kid. And there was even a scene in New York. I would go see the Toasters play, stuff like that.
How were you getting into all this music?
How did I find stuff? Yeah. I mean, it was different back then, before the internet, right? You'd listen to WNYU, and when I lived in Yonkers, I'm trying to think what other radio station. I definitely remember listening to NYU a lot. The New Afternoon Show, they would play just new indie stuff, and then go to record stores. Go to shops, buy some fanzines and stuff. But a lot of it, I just remember listening to the radio and writing down things, or just staring at records in the store. I mean, I say this a lot to people, talking about the changes in how people buy records or something. But used to buy records by the cover sometimes. Because it looked cool, and you're like, I don't know, I got $10, I got to buy something.
That's how I bought Dirty Mind.
Exactly.
Dirty Mind.
That's how I bought New Day Rising by Husker Du, who became one of my favorite bands.
Yeah.
But I was just like, SST, it's a cool label, and like, it just looks weird. What is this?
Yeah.
And I just kind of just remember staring at it a bunch.
And people
it
may
doesn't
not
always work
understand
out,
like the investment if you're a kid to pay money for something that you have not heard.
Right. But the thing is, the flip side, and again, this is like being a record clerk for all these years. You think about it, is that, yeah, it's a big investment. It's a big risk. You might not like it. But it also made you invested in the music in a different way.
Like, I'm going to like it.
Yeah, you would make even something that you would listen to the first time and it would just be kind of difficult, it doesn't connect. It might be just a little too weird or just coming from a place you don't quite understand. Yeah. You kind of had to keep listening to it because it's what you had. You spent that money. You don't have that many records.
Exactly.
So you'd listen to it again a few days later and then again. And then you might realize after a couple of weeks like that it was changing your world. It was incredible and opened your mind up to something else. Whereas now it's pretty easy to just click to the next track. And that's what people do. You know, I mean, one of the main ways people think about what's successful in music is looking at how quickly people click away from it. Looking at that metric, that's something that people in the music industry look at a lot, and that's pretty different worlds,
Like people are listening, 30 seconds and they're clicking off.
Yeah, it's just like, wow, we got over a minute, or like they got all the way through the song. It's like, this is a hit. It's incredible,
And they may only do that once.
Yeah.
What would be, I'm going to switch this up, your album, the first important album that you got on your own? Was it the Husker Du? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm trying to remember the first record. Like that first show really sticks out for me. But what is like the first? I mean, I remember buying like the first records that me and my sister bought, not being records that I wouldn't really stand by anymore. Like I know my sister bought all the Billy Joel records when we were kids, and those definitely got played in my basement a lot. But I mean, even like the Grease soundtrack, I remember we had. I'm trying to remember when I bought, like, what the earliest records I bought that I still stand by, that I still listen to. I don't know where I went from. Like, I definitely listened to like early, like Beatles and Stones and stuff like that, and bought those records when I was a kid. And it's some stuff I had from my parents. Pretty early on, I started getting into. I listened to some like British punk and stuff like that. I got into like when I was born in 1970. So in the late 70s, I was quite young, but I did hear some of that music like on the radio in New York and stuff. Like my parents used to listen to BAI all the time, and they would have new music shows and play stuff. And I got kind of into that stuff, and I don't know when I started buying those records. Definitely by the time I was like, 13 or something, I was like going into the city by myself, going record shopping, and starting to get into, in the early mid 80s, like, whatever that indie scene was,
Okay.
By like 85, 86, I'm 15 or 16, playing in a band, really into music, buying a lot of records.
Yeah. Okay. So when you said you went to college for a year, right?
I went to Oberlin for 1 year.
Okay. And what did you go for, or your intention?
I mean, nothing. That school, you didn't even need to declare a major until like year 3 or something. I just went to college because that's what you do after high school, right? And I did it for a year and just realized I had a good experience there. Some of my class I liked a lot. I met some really good people there, and I played some fun music too. And there was and that's a music school partially. I was not in the conservatory, and it's a classical conservatory mostly. They do, I guess, more jazz these days too. But it just means there's a lot of creative people there, and it's kind of like a hippie creative school. I had a fun year there, but it was, my parents were paying a ton of money for it, and I just thought, I'm never gonna use this degree. I want to play music. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, but I just don't think I need this college degree. I can always go back or whatever. And my parents didn't fight with me about it. They were okay with it. And it's only until very recently that I ever thought about college again. But you still, even at age 47, you still have to put what college you went to on your resume when you apply for jobs. And I was shocked that I didn't even think of putting something on there. Of course, I didn't graduate from a college, but people
they still ask.
They ask. Yeah, people will just be like, so what school did you go to? And when you look at job listings, it'll just say like what degree is required. And I have to admit it, I was like, even though it's just idiotic of me, because it's obviously like, of course that's what people ask, but it seems so, it shocked me. I was just like, really? Could this possibly matter? What college I went to? Like, would my Bachelor of Arts degree help me with this position right now? But
apparently in the eyes of, I think it's a weeding out thing. Yeah.
If you couldn't make it through college, you probably aren't cut out for this job.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, maybe that's it. Which is not necessarily true, right?
I guess it remains to be seen. I'll check back in with me in a few years. I'll tell you.
So now you're going to pursue, you leave Oberlin, you're going to pursue the music. What does that look like?
I came back to New York and just tried to make some money. Lived with my parents' house for maybe like 4 or 5 months. Worked as a bike messenger. Saved some money and moved out to San Francisco. Just because I think I didn't want to be in New York. I was just like, need to take a break from where I grew up. I didn't know anybody out there. Really, I knew there was a couple people from Oberlin who had moved there who weren't really friends of mine, but who I kind of was friendly with. And my parents did have a family friend who was living in Berkeley who I could stay with for a couple weeks until I could find a place. So I guess I flew. No, I drove out. I had my van so I drove out here. I drove out there and just got a job as a bike messenger. I actually got there right before that big earthquake would have been like 91 or something. There was a huge earthquake in the Bay Area, and I had just arrived and was standing in the middle of downtown, having just been hired at this bike messenger place. And the earth started shaking. But then I lived out there for a few years, played music, worked there, worked really hard on a band. And then I kind of started to be not that excited about the band. I just felt like it wasn't quite coming together after a couple of years the way I wanted. And I heard from a friend that a band that I was a fan of, the Antietam, who we were kind of mutual fans of, whatever, and he heard they were looking for a drummer or something. Yeah. And I was like, it might be good to move back to New York. And I flew back and auditioned, and we really hit it off. And I moved back, within a couple months or something, moved back here. It all happened pretty quickly because the band was about to record a record, and I needed to they had a lot going on. And so I moved back kind of quickly, moved back in with my family, and lived at my parents' place for a few years. Just playing music, working part-time in record stores, touring. I played with Antietam, and I still play with that band. But I played with a couple other bands too. Yeah. Toured with that band Codeine a bunch, playing drums, for about 6 months. Played in a band with Tara Jane O'Neill for a while and did a couple other things. And just worked part-time in record stores until, like I said, I was 25 when we opened Other Music. And I continued to do a lot of that. I was still playing and touring some and whatever, but obviously I was also spending a lot of time running the store. Yeah.
When you guys opened the store, did you have like a clear concept it was going to be? It was going to be different than, say, Tower? Because you were across the street.
Yeah. We had a very clear concept of what it was going to be. Like I said, so Jeff Gibson had been hired by Mr. Kim to run this record store. Someone else had done it very briefly beforehand and had just made it kind of like a regular CD store that was selling like more mainstream music, brought in a little bit of stuff. It wasn't doing much. But he was Mr. Kim already really had a name for underground video. Yeah. It was, a kind of iconic video shop. And so even though he, was not although he even produced a couple movies eventually, I wouldn't say he was really had an artistic temperament, and he was not like into the music or the film. I don't think he knew anything about any of it. But he kind of got that he should have an underground music store, an alternative music store or something. And so he hired Jeff, who had a background and had been working at a couple at Dutch East India, which was a good indie distributor at the time. And then I was hired pretty soon after that, part-time. I'm trying to remember what the mutual friend was, who someone told me they were opening. I was working at Midnight Records on 23rd Street, which is a really cool store, kind of a garage rock store. But this was more in line with the music I was listening to in general. And I got hired part-time, and then Chris Vanderloo, who was living in Delaware at the time, but his wife was from here and knew Jeff. And Chris got hired, and the three of us made a store that was, some version of what Other Music became. It was Other Music in the back of a video store, I guess that describes it. I could go deeper, but it was in the back of a video store run by a Korean businessman. Okay. I mean, I guess that would about describe it. Yeah. So we were very successful at Kim's. We had a great time. We did a lot of cool stuff in there, but it was just, not an ideal situation in a lot of ways. And we knew it could be a lot better if we did it on our own, and we wouldn't be getting paid I'm sure we were making like $8 an hour or something under the table, all cash.
So when did you move, get your own spot?
To open Other Music?
Yeah.
We opened that store in 1995, in the winter of 95, right at the end of the year, like in very beginning of December, I think.
Well, how long were you at Kim's doing that?
We were at Kim's for a couple years.
Okay.
And then we left kind of in stages. Jeff left first, and I stayed on pretty close to when the store opened. But we had this. We found the spot. It was a sublease. We weren't necessarily looking to be across the street from Tower, but we were kind of looking to be in that area because, at that time, that was the center of where the music scene was. It's hard to imagine now. But
what was over
the
there
East Village? Well, it was just like CBGB was past its prime, but it was still the iconic East Village Rock Club, and it was just a few blocks from us. And there were still good shows there. It was starting to fade out at that time. There was a while where they didn't book quite as much great music as they did, but it was still happening at that point. And Brownies was not far from there. What year did the Mercury Lounge open? Sometime around then, pretty close by. It's just the East Village was also where all the musicians lived. It was just the cheap, cool place to live, and it was also a lot of abandoned buildings and a lot of drug dealing and a lot of, it was a crazy different time and place. But it was also just definitely different because it was cheap. So there was a lot of artists there, and there was a lot of that. Williamsburg was not happening yet. There was no cutting edge, or there was very little cutting edge music culture happening in Brooklyn. It was all in downtown Manhattan. So that was a great location. And when we saw the space, that place had for a few years, Island Records had rented it and had made this place called the Island Trading Company. That was just kind of like a reggae and like they sold clothing and records and like lifestyle things. It was not successful. They had a giant Bob Marley poster on the wall, and they had kind of a vibe in there, but it never did anything. We had some remnants of it in our decor for a long time. There was a little tiny palm tree over the door for like almost the first 15 years or something, and it disappeared at some point.
That's who you subleased from?
Yeah, we sublet it from them. They opened for a couple years, and then they went out of business, but they still had the lease, and I think they had several years left on their lease when we rented it from them, and then eventually just started renting directly from the landlord. But when we saw that space, it just seemed kind of perfect. It was close to NYU, close to all the East Village. Broadway and Lafayette are both big thoroughfares. 4th Street is also a busy street going, east.
Yeah.
And Tower was right across the street, and that was a pretty cool record store in a lot of ways. I mean, it was a mainstream record store, but I grew up shopping in Tower. They had a lot of indie music. They had a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah.
It was not a bad store for a long time. But it wasn't a great store either. And there was a lot of stuff they didn't have, and they didn't have the sort of focus and attention as our store could. And we just kind of felt like, it's a no-brainer. And we'll pull customers from them all day. And we did. It was a great relationship having them there.
Were you like consciously thinking about whatever the cracks you could fill in the cracks of?
I mean, not in that we bought the music we cared about.
Okay.
So we never tried. We weren't very good ever at being businessmen like that and thinking about what was the right thing for the market. We always were just buying interesting music that we liked, that the people who worked with us liked, that we thought was important.
Yeah.
Not to say that every record in there I'm going to stand by, but I think someone who worked there would stand by any record that was in there. And we definitely took advantage of what Tower wouldn't, the cracks that they weren't filling.
Okay.
And it was just funny because it almost became a problem because, I mean, yeah, you can imagine the people who worked at Tower, they're just record fans too. They would all shop at our store. Yeah. We had a very good relationship, and we would run over there too to buy things that we didn't carry, or they would have vinyl cutouts. Sometimes you get great deals or whatever. But they would just send anything they didn't have. They would say, you should try other music across the street, try other music. Yeah. A lot of times it was amazing. We would get a lot of stuff, but they would send anything they didn't have. They would send people over for, and obviously we didn't fill all holes.
Yeah.
But we just wanted to be on top of what was happening in new music. It was always supposed to be a broad, diverse selection, but it wasn't just new. It wasn't just punk or indie or dance music or hip hop or dub or, there's a lot of very specialized stores, and we weren't that. Yeah. We kind of just tried to bring a lot of things together. It was a small space, but enough space that you could kind of just try to approach what was happening in underground music,
Okay. What do you think, looking back, made it special to so many people?
I mean, the first thing I would say is that sort of environment, the record store environment, is just sort of like a special environment for people who love music. And it's something that is a little hard to replicate in a digital world. So a lot of the kind of emotion that people had about it when we were closing, I think partially just has to do with that like, it's just like, well, how do you have this space where you just like run into people to talk about and just to end up talking about records and music, and people you'd meet, people would meet, you'd bump into friends there, see a musician you loved, find someone to play bass in your band, make a date with meet your future husband, whatever. Yeah. All these different things, it was just like a social place. And we were very passionate about what we did. We always had people there who were just deep heads who would just uncover new music all the time. And so that's to just have a place where you would walk in and people just like you heard this music that changed your life creates a emotional connection to it. You know, there's just something about that. The person who turns you on to that thing, who just, music opens doors for people. It opens their minds. It defines their personality sometimes. So I think that there's just this sort of weird emotional connection to that space.
It's also the people you had there. I mean, because you could go to someone and like, hey, I like this, and that they knew what they were talking about. Yeah, I mean, that was all. It wasn't just warm bodies. Yeah, that was all we tried to do, and it's hard to do all the time for every person. But we tried to have a really broad mix of people there who could just talk about records. And
as time went on, that became less of a premium in our world, because the truth is, with digital music, first of all, you can just listen to it. You don't have to ask someone what it sounds like. You can just pop it up on YouTube in a second. Second of all, it's people come in with more knowledge because it's so easy to listen to that. You don't have to just say like, I listened to this, I like this. Well, can you recommend something else like it? Because you can probably just, if you tap that in on Google, you'll find 20 things, and you can just listen to them and decide.
But if I know you, I can trust you.
Right.
Yeah, you have that.
For sure. Well, you get to know the person's personality and their taste. But it became less, in our early years, that's what we did all day, every day. It was a lot less of finding that one. People come in there looking for one thing, you find that for them, and then you end up taking them on a tour of everything else you've been listening to that reminds you of that, or that's in that vein. That was the most important thing to have. That definitely changed as the culture changed. We still did it, but it was just a little less important to a lot of the people who came in there. But yeah, I mean, it's just that I think people are connected to the space where that, where they discovered all those things.
What are you most proud of what you've accomplished?
Of what other music accomplished? I mean, I don't know. It was crazy for me to see the reaction that people had when we closed. We knew people would really be upset, and that we had a lot of very loyal customers, and we knew that it would cause a lot of emotion. But we couldn't have anticipated the level of, just the number of articles written, tears shed, cakes that were delivered, bottles of wine. I don't know. It was just a wild scene for a long time. And there was a lot of people, thousands of people who we hadn't seen in years, or we didn't even know, who would just show up in tears to tell you some crazy story about, when they were 15. And this woman, it was after we closed, and I was like cleaning up by myself, like there in one of those days, crazy exhausted days between the day we closed and the day we had to be out of there. And this woman knocked on the door and came in, and she was in town from Connecticut or something, maybe because it was the Pride Parade weekend, and she was in there, and she just told me this story about how like the music that we carried and the energy from that place when she was like 14 or 15 or something, like made her realize that she had to like be herself and like pursue her come out to her parents and like kind of pursue an artistic life or something like that. That was the kind of energy that was flowing through there at the end. And it was really overwhelming, and that's obviously there's, to know that you've touched that many people and something you put so much of yourself into, has helped people, find some kind of joy or emotion in their lives. It means a lot. And we definitely helped. The most fun thing about working in a record store is when you get some weird, amazing artist that you love and not enough people love into the hands of that freak who is going to just go crazy for it, and then they come back and say, oh my God, that you were so right. That was amazing. How about that part or whatever? That is an incredible feeling. And, both ways. It's great to, you feel like you're helping this artist. You feel like you're helping this fan. It's just like a beautiful, special moment. And, doing that hand to hand is amazing. Kind of realizing you've created this environment where that could happen, is special. But I mean, in the moment of it all, I don't know, like that's definitely an emotion from like the closing mayhem or something.
Okay.
I don't know if like, I don't know. We just had a record store. It wasn't that. We had a lot of fun. We put on some fun shows and had, sold some cool records.
Yeah.
It was as much about the customers and the culture in New York as it was about any of us. We did a good job of it, and we managed to get some good people in there to run it most of the time. But it was like we captured an energy of like New York City's music community. I truly don't think that was particularly about me or any one of us or some vision we had. We just were fans and kind of created some, the fan zone, which is the business that went into Tower when they closed the MLB fan zone, Major League Baseball fan zone. They had some weird like
they used to have performances all the time.
They did have some performances, and they would like host like a web series where they watch baseball games or something like that.
Because I walked by one time, like, wait, that's MLB. Why is Adam? What's his name from Star Search? What's his last name? Adam. Star. I'm like, why is he performing at MLB?
Yeah, they had events and stuff there. Fan zone.
Yeah. So now, was it a few weeks ago? You had the Come Together Label Fair Music Festival. Let's talk about that. When did you get the idea to do that? This was the second.
Yeah, this is the second year for that. So that's an event that I curate with PS1. Gerald Hamill, who's worked with me at Other Music for many years, he ran our websites and our newsletter, and kind of like he was like our editor and webmaster. We soon after the store closed, sometime that summer, we closed in June, I was approached by it was Jenny Schlenska. I'm not going to say her last name right. Jenny Schlenska, who worked, who was a curator, like a events curator, music curator at PS1 at the time. She's actually since gone on to work at. She's now the director of Performance Space 122 in the East Village. But she was at PS1 at the time, and she had been tossing around this idea of trying to do a record fair that was in line with the art book fair that they host there. The art book fair isn't really curated by PS1. That's really put together by Printed Matter, and it was an event that Printed Matter was doing before they even was at PS1. But it's become a really awesome, fun, art book and publishing art zine, just sort of a really cool art publication event that's huge that they have there every year. It's a lot of fun and hugely successful. And so Jenny had this idea of doing trying to come up with a way to do a record fair. And so Jenny and Taja Cheek, who is the assistant curator there. So we started talking to Jenny and Taja about it, and then halfway through the process, Jenny actually left. And she continued to sort of, the first year she continued to kind of check in from time to time, but she's taken another job. So it's really Taja and Gerald Hamill and myself who do all the curation for it. And the idea was to make a record fair, and we've all been to record fairs. Set up a bunch of tables, have people, with boxes selling vinyl, but focusing really on new music. So this year we did have Human Head, who did a used room. So we had some used stuff, but it's 99% new music, and it's all run by labels. And it's really like, in some ways almost, I don't want to say an industry event, but like the energy comes from people who run all these labels are running the tables. So it's a chance to come and buy records from the person who's actually intimately involved in running that label. And have a bunch of our favorite independent labels there, but also do a lot of programming around it. So we have some workshops, performances, interviews, panels, different things happening all day throughout the building. So this was our second year. We had one in 2017. It's called the Come Together Label Fair and Music Festival. And we had a great time the first year. And, Jenny's not there anymore, like I said, but we hope to do it every year and have it be an annual event. It grew a lot this year, and I think there's room for it to grow a lot more still.
Did it feel like a logical transition from what you had been doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's only 1 weekend a year or something.
Yeah.
I mean, we are actually talking about doing another one in another city. We've got a couple people who've approached us about maybe trying to expand it a little bit, and I think it would be possible to do that. It's pretty different from running a store, and financially and in every way. But yeah, I mean, in some ways, that event brings together all the things that I love to do at Other Music. Yeah. It's kind of like having the best version you could of Other Music, because it's got like the full catalog from our like 100 favorite labels or something. So that is amazing. And, it's a really deep selection of all that stuff. Yeah. But then we did a lot of what I did at Other Music over the years was not just selling records. We programmed this video series live we had in stores at the store, hundreds of them that I programmed, live performance events, readings, things like that. Then we had a video series that sort of was part of that called Live at Other Music, where we kind of did these, where we interviewed these artists. I would basically program these artists, do these really beautiful audio and video recordings, do these interviews with them. We did a bunch of big South by Southwest events and also other like live events around New York. Yeah. All that stuff is really fun for me. I love creating like a special, I love live music. That it is one of the rare, kind of like transcendent times, bunch of people together in a room, just getting into this weird zone. It's, I see a lot of live music. I love going to see live music. And I love putting on live events that are kind of a little different, where there's more than just like you're in a bar watching a band, but it's in a special place, and kind of create an atmosphere where there can be a different type of, try to cut down. We sold beer at MoMA, but try to cut down on the sort of like bar vibe and do something a little deeper. So
where music isn't just background.
Yeah, exactly.
For your drinking.
It's doing a special thing. Exactly. And something special with the music and this, and just like these panels and different things. It's so fun. And like this year we did, one of the things I was really excited about was this Dead Moon exhibit and book release event. It's a band I've been a fan of for a really long time and been, friendly with, had some correspondence, got to work with them. Yeah, bringing their records into the store back in the day. I helped them book a couple shows the first time they came to New York, things like that. And then to get to, Fred Cole had passed last year and, trying to, I felt it was and there's this amazing book that Mississippi Records just put out about them. But like it seemed like a good way to honor them. But just to get to like spend some time, comb through the archive, come up with this amazing exhibit, install it, figure out who could interview Tootie and do something really special with that. That's the kind of stuff that I really enjoy. It's really fun. Meet new people, make these interesting, meet creative, interesting people who are working in music and try to like help them realize their vision, do something cool, is super fun. And just I love all the people who run labels, just the whole ecosystem of the indie music world, I think that's my world, So in that way it felt like a really natural extension. And, a special, I think it's, I do think that we're not trying to be like a music festival the way all these festivals are in New York now, but I do think that, a lot of the big music events, definitely in this city, kind of like dumb it down a little more than our fans really want. Just like people are into diverse, interesting, difficult music. It's like you don't just have to have like the top, the biggest Billboard stars or the biggest Pitchfork stars or whatever. Like just kind of, there's a lot of different people are there's a lot of weird creative people in New York who will come out for an eclectic bill.
I believe that, dude.
Weird, we have a lot of esoteric labels who come sell records there too, and they are overwhelmed by the kind of knowledge of the fans who come out and stuff. Like people want to come out and just geek out about great music.
And if you present it to people.
Yeah, if you present it in the right way and get it in front of them and make it accessible, people will really go deep, you know?
Because I've had people tell me, well, you shouldn't do all genres of music. You should just interview one genre. I'm like, no, I trust that people can handle listening to more than one genre of music.
Yeah.
Your festival proves that. And so we're wrapping up. There's the other music documentary. Where are you at with that? How's that progressing? That's,
so when we announced that we were closing, a good friend and former employee named Rob Hatchmiller said, literally, like when we announced it, like that afternoon, that and shortly after it was announced, he like texted or something and said, "Can I come?" Or maybe he just showed up. I think he just showed up, and then he said, "Do you mind if I film a little bit or something?" And he just started filming some stuff, and then he just asked if he could stick around and keep filming. And then eventually he said, "Listen, I want to do something with this." At the time, I couldn't even have an opinion about a documentary about other music. I didn't particularly like the idea, but I really like Rob a lot. And Rob and Paloma, his wife, are just like really good friends of mine. And the two of them have this production company and they do a lot of great work. And I was like, yeah, I mean, if they want to do this, that's fine. And eventually we agreed to let them have our video archive. We had a lot of video assets from our old in-stores to let them film, kind of help them make some connections with some people and stuff. I will admit that I'm still not sure what I think about it. Meaning, like, I've had a great life. I'm happy. There's a lot of fun, interesting, amazing things that have happened to me, and I love my life. But I'm not sure I would want to watch a movie about it.
Okay.
And
I get that.
And I don't know what this movie is going to be. Meaning I don't know I don't think, it's not about me, I think it's more about the culture. And like, even like what I was saying, like I feel like that store was about this special, exciting time in New York music culture. I think that's kind of what the movie's about. Not, but I haven't seen it. I've seen a couple clips from a couple parts. Between just the crazy energy in there while we were closing, and they got a lot of really cool interview stuff, I think, with just like longtime customers and stuff. I'm sure that's a lot of interesting stuff. There's a lot of great live music stuff in there from our archives and from our closing concert and that parade that we did. There was a lot of really great artists who did, very cool performances that we have on tape from the end and from years leading up to it. Between all that stuff, there's like half a great movie there. What makes that a story that that we're gonna tune in, that we're gonna spend $12.50 and a bucket of popcorn in the theater, or even tune into Netflix. I guess I'm still not sure.
Josh.
What, 15, 18?
$12.50. Yeah, I just paid $17.40 for a movie.
The last movie I went to was at Alamo Drafthouse with my daughter.
Okay.
I'm sure it was $20 each at least. Yeah, $25. But I don't go to a lot of movies these days. And we did also buy a pizza.
Okay.
I think I had a couple beers. And I think she had an $8 bucket of Sour Patch Kids. But we digress.
Yes.
So, the footage I've seen, I've found really moving and really interesting in a lot of ways, but it's like my scrapbook, I don't know. I'm not sure. It may be too soon for me. But I believe in those guys, and I think they're pretty excited about where it's going, and they're pretty close to being done with it. We'll see. Okay.
Until the rough cut, right? You'll know that.
Yeah, exactly. Luckily, they had a baby recently, so they've been derailed briefly.
Well, Josh, this is great. Where's a good place for people to keep up with what you're doing? The festival?
I don't know. I don't have my Instagram firing. I mean, I have, after I'm around. Hey, if you're in New York and you're going out to shows, you might find me somewhere. I have a beard now, so you might not recognize me at first.
And they can still go to othermusic.com.
Yeah, othermusic.com is still an active affair. I mean, our label, we're sort of taking a break with the Other Music Recording Company label right now. I was sort of waiting to figure out what my next step in life was going to be, and what kind of, I figured I was going to get a music industry job. And I want to kind of like sort that through. And I have started working recently, and I'm really kind of like I think the next era of my life is falling into place a little bit. Yeah.
But thank you, Josh, for doing this. Was great. I'm glad we got to connect.
Yeah, you asked me right when the store had closed if we would do this, and I just felt like it was. I had been talking a lot for the past couple months. It had been after like 100 interviews that I did, and I was like, please, you know what? I strung you along for a while, and then I was like, I just can't do it. Yeah, I have nothing left to say. So I may not be ready to watch the movie about my life yet, but I am at least ready to talk about it a little bit.
Okay. Well, this is even better because there's like 2 years distance and.
Yeah,
since then.
Exactly. I mean, for me, I definitely feel like I've come out on the other side of just trying to figure out what am I doing next, and just getting some. It's very hard. I like I said, I started that place when I was 25. I put a lot of myself into it for a long time, so it's good to. I feel like I came out of a fog at the end there or something.
Cool. Well, I wish you the best in everything else you do.
And to you.
Thank you. There you have it, my conversation with Josh Madell. Check out othermusic.com for information on the Come Together Festival. Plus, you can get plenty of Come Together and other music swag. I'm online, few places. TalkMusicTalk.com for more podcast information. You can also follow me on social media on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at This Is Boice, and a couple of call to actions for you. You want to hear them? If you enjoyed this episode, please share it on social media. You can tag me. You can also leave a 5-star rating and or review. This all helps to grow the Talk Music Talk audience so I can eventually monetize this thing. Also, let me tell you about the Talk Music Talk app. It is free wherever you like to get your apps, or you can subscribe to the podcast and stream it everywhere: iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio. Just search for Talk Music Talk. You can also find the podcast on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/This Is Boice, starting with episode 100. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, and there will be a next time, this one's for you, Liz.